Hello, and welcome to ONET Academy. This previously recorded webinar is part of the ONET Academy webinar series, a set of online training presentations. This webinar recording, an ONET Academy briefing, ONET's new and emerging occupations, will start momentarily.
Gary, thank you very much, and welcome to all of you to this webinar on new and emerging occupations. My name is Janet Wall, and I'm an independent consultant with interest areas in assessment and career development, program evaluation, occupational information. And for the last 5 years or so, Mayor and Mayor has been a client of mine, and I have been designing and delivering webinars that are related in some way to the ONET system. So this one on new and emerging occupations is one of the most recent webinars that we have developed. And so I have 3 major objectives that I would like for us to accomplish during this webinar session. And the first is to describe the concept behind this notion of new and emerging occupations. I'd like to review the procedures used to identify those new and emerging occupations that was done in a pilot study sponsored by the U.S. Department of Labor. But that pilot study was so successful that it is now being used as the standard methodology for identifying new and emerging occupations. And then I'd like to show you the list of new and emerging occupations that are either currently part of ONET or are projected to be part of the system in the near future. So with that in mind, let's take a look at this whole notion of what are new and emerging occupations. Well, there are occupations that haven't existed before in the U.S. economy. So, for example, occupations like wireless communications technician haven't really been around until the last few years because of the explosion of wireless communication in this country. There are new and emerging occupations are being worked by people who have a certain combination of skills that are being paid by employers, such as geographic information specialists. So there are people who have been in situations where additional kinds of skills are needed, and those combinations of skills have actually formulated new occupations in various businesses. And there are also occupations that have existed in the past, but in small numbers. And because of a variety of situations, those numbers are growing. So, for example, I think a great example is this notion of geriatric nurse. So as the baby boomers are getting older, they are going to be requiring some additional and specialized health care, and geriatric nurses are much more in demand and much more available than in the past. So, kind of more specifically, new and emerging occupations are those that are becoming more important because of increasing numbers, and they're emerging due to some sort of technological change or changes in society, changes in markets, changing in legislation or regulation. There are existing occupations that, for one reason or another, have been substantially modified, so they're actually different from what the occupation used to be in the past. And there are also occupations that have seen a really rapid change in skill sets and require updating, and they're not covered by the current occupational taxonomy. So what influences or helps to create or support this notion of new and emerging occupations? Well, there are 5 major things that occur in our economy, be it global economy and also national economy and local economy. But basically the moving forces for new and emerging occupations include technology, law, changing demographics, changing business practices, or a combination of all those that kind of intends on particular industries impinge on particular kinds of occupations to help them evolve into something that is, in fact, new. So let's take a look at some specifics. Let's take a look at this notion of technology and what technology has done to influence the emergence of new occupations, new industries. So with the advent of computer graphics and the additional power and capability of computer graphics, that has kind of spawned new occupations such as multimedia and animation kinds of occupations. And you probably now go to the movies and see the cartoons that are cartoon movies that are animated using computer graphics. They're really quite sophisticated and require a sophisticated set of skills. So in the past, the cartoons used to be done by multiple drawings, and now they utilize animation technology and multimedia kinds of skills. In addition, for computer graphics, we have desktop publishing, and that kind of occupation has really taken off in the past several years. The whole notion of network computers has spawned the occupation of network specialists. So these are people that not only understand computers, but understand how to cope with this whole notion of linking all of those computers and what kinds of capabilities and what kinds of problems occur because of that. Genetics. There's been huge breakthroughs in genetics in the last several years, and that has spawned some new and different occupations such as bioinformatics and genetic counselors, and biotechnologists, and so on. And then imaging techniques as well. Dosimeters, and these are people in occupations that measure bone density. And then we have web technology, of course, and that has brought about this notion of usability specialists. So as you can see, technology has made a tremendous impact in really creating the foundation for these new and emerging occupations. But laws also, such as welfare to work, that has created the need for such people as job coaches and human service workers. Telecommunications laws has brought about this whole area of closed captioning, and we need people who are skilled in that area to be able to do that. Criminal laws have brought about people in occupations such as restitution specialists and child advocates. And then Medicaid, assisted living specialists, and visiting nurses. And you probably heard about No Child Left Behind legislation has brought about testing specialists at the state and school district levels in particular, and often even in large schools. And also graduation coaches, people that track what's going on with individual students to make sure that they, in fact, have the coursework and the success in their courses to graduate. Demographics has made a difference as well. As you know, the population has been aging due to the baby boomer situation. And so that, again, brings about this whole notion of geriatric nurses. There's the concept of focus on youth. So all of us baby boomers are wanting to look younger. And so there's been an increase in the need for people with capabilities in the plastic surgeon area and also medical estheticians. And because we have a lot of two-income households, that has sort of begat this notion of having a personal chef or a corporate concierge. And then the aging population lifestyle. And so because we want to stay in our homes rather than to go to an additional kind of old folks home, we have an increased need for visiting nurses. And also we have need for patient advocates and also retirement advisors as well. Then, business practices have created the need and condition for some new and emerging occupations. So the use of HMOs. We have now review coordinators, people who take a look at the paperwork and decide whether some kind of cost is going to be reimbursed or not, or to what level it will be reimbursed. Internet sales and banking. So we have people that are privacy advocates and privacy officers. And networking and lifelong learning, which has become a huge industry in the last several years, primarily because of the advent of Internet technology. We have people that are creating courses. They're course editors, and they're transforming content that was normally used in a face-to-face setting into a situation where it could be delivered over the Internet. And then we also have information architects. How do you put the information together in such a way that people can more easily learn it? What should be taught before what? How should the content be arranged so that the learning is most efficient? And now, as I was talking, I imagine you were thinking about certain new occupations that you have seen in the last several years. And I wonder if you could put them into the chat box, and I'll read them off so that everyone is able to hear it. So let me see some comments in the chat box about new and emerging occupations that you have seen. Bloggers, absolutely. That's definitely something that has influenced the political landscape for sure. Virtual assistants, yep. Dietitians, bariatric surgeons, yes, absolutely. Homeland security specialists, alternative energy engineers, home health aides, technical support specialists, web designers, geospatial mapping. Waste recyclers, yes, absolutely. Adult daycare, online library reference service, advanced technology, pet daycare, yeah, absolutely, pet spas, okay, if any others come in, I will read them off. But yeah, you've come up with some additional occupations that have never been around. Here's bilingual services specialist. Yes, absolutely. Nanorobotics, payee tech. Okay, so you have the idea. You've come up with several kinds of jobs and occupations that probably weren't around in prior to, say, 10 years ago, but they're certainly becoming more increase in numbers in the last several years. And some of these will probably continue to increase in numbers and importance in the future, especially things that relate to areas such as geospatial technology, nanotechnology, biotechnology, and so on, which are new and emerging industries that are spawning new and emerging occupations. So very good. some good ideas there. All right, well, why should we focus on new and emerging occupations? Well, from a Department of Labor perspective, they want to stay current with what's going on in the U.S. economy, so they need to pay attention to what's happening in the economy with regard to new and emerging occupations, and then, of course, include that in the ONET system to be sure that ONET, in fact, is reflecting the reality within the U.S. Economy. Also, there's a Department of Labor focus on high-growth industries due to the President's high-growth initiative. And this is where we are worrying about in-demand occupations and industries, those that are certainly growing in numbers. They have a lot of jobs available. They're being transformed by technology. They're important to the U.S. economy. They're important to Homeland Security, and so on. So these are critical occupations that the Department of Labor is focusing on. All right, and also there's this need to help regions within the U.S. and even specific businesses look to the future and be prepared for what's happening in the future so that they can keep pace with these new and emerging occupations and continue to grow their industries and their businesses. All right, so who benefits from having information on new and emerging occupations? Well, they're clearly people who are looking for new careers. So if you are involved in career coaching, career development, providing some career advice to people, resume writers, and so on, you're going to want to focus people's attention on the future so that they have, in fact, an opportunity to continue their career growth, their career management, and so on. So we're not putting them into jobs that are going to be declining in importance, or perhaps even not even being in existence in the U.S. economy. So we want to look to what's happening in the future. People searching for new pathways within their current industry. And so if you are in a particular industry and you are in a particular occupation, perhaps you may want to modify what you're doing within that industry and occupation to meet particular needs. And so people need to be aware of new and emerging occupations that are coming online within their industries. And then education and training organizations who want to help develop some programs to meet the needs of people who are going to be working in these new and emerging occupations. So places like universities and vocational schools and community colleges want to stay up to date and aware about what's happening in the U.S. economy so that they can prepare people to be able to work in these new and emerging occupations. And also, of course, we want to make sure that regional economies are able to know what's happening and what's projected to happen in the future so that they can be ready and planning for what's going to happen 5 and 10 years out. All right, how do you identify new and emerging occupations? Here are some general concepts. What people tend to do to kind of stay up to date with what's happening in the U.S. economy, they stay aware of available training and certifications that are out there. Clearly, they would also scan job postings, so people are looking at, say, Monster and Career Builder and also classified ads in newspapers and seeing what kinds of jobs people are wanting to have filled and what the skills are. They also review internet sites for various industries to see what kind of information is on those sites that would indicate that there are new and emerging occupations that are out there. Also, employer suggestions. So, for example, the U.S. Department of Labor actually is in contact with employers to ask what their needs are, what they see happening in terms of the trends in the future. And people also review information from professional associations. So professional associations have members, and the members talk to the professional association staff, and they actually promote and prepare literature regarding new and emerging occupations. And also, what happens is you can search journals also to see what kind of articles are being written about, say, new and emerging technologies, demographics, legislation, and so on that could influence what is really happening in the U.S. economy. What I want to do now is to focus a little bit on a pilot study that was sponsored by the U.S. Department of Labor to see what kinds of techniques and methodologies should be used or could be used to identify new and emerging occupations that should be included as part of the ONET system. And so there were two particular criteria that had to be met in order to be considered to be a new and emerging occupation. One, that it was not currently reflected by the existing ONET taxonomy, and that it involved significantly different work than other occupations. So what was happening in this occupation in terms of tasks, knowledge, skills, and abilities was different than other occupations that were already included as part of the ONET system. Other criteria that were considered was that there needed to be a significant number of employees working in the occupation. So if you had a new and emerging occupation that had just a few people working in it, it was really totally specialized and only was being an occupation that was practiced by a few people, that would not be a criteria that would be met. It would have to have significant numbers of people. The occupation would have to have a positive growth rate, and so it had to be growing quickly. It had to use new or different technologies, and it might also have to produce a different kind of output, different kind of product, different kind of information that would come out of that occupation. So the output or the outcome is different than what we would find in another occupation. And so the people in the occupation would be performing significantly different work than other occupations. All right, other criteria would be that the new and emerging occupation would require a different level or type of education and training than perhaps a similar occupation. So this would be an occupation that would be transformed from another occupation with some kinds of specialized skills, and as a result, some specialized education and training. And it would be developed due to changes in technology, society, law, and business practices. It might require specialized licensure or certification, and those requirements for that licensure or certification would be different than it would be for other occupations. It would have a related professional organization for that occupation. And so it might have related journal or professional publications. It could be described at a similar level of detail to the current ONET occupation. And again, the output is a different kind of service or product. Well, the starting point for finding new and emerging occupations would be those occupations and industries that are considered high-growth industries. And those are the ones that are being focused on by Career Voyages. And Career Voyages is also based on the ONET system, but it is focused primarily on in-demand occupations and industries, high-growth industries. And we have here some of the high-growth industries to include advanced manufacturing, biotechnology, energy, geospatial technology, hospitality, retail trade, information technology, construction, financial services, healthcare, automotive, and transportation. All right. There is a several-step process that people use to identify new and emerging occupations. So again, to find candidate occupations, they would focus on the in-demand industries, which I just reviewed. They would look for growth and change within that industry. So they would focus on things that have impinged on that industry, such as new technologies, business practices, laws, and so on, and determine whether or not those kinds of things would be affecting the way people work in that particular industry. They would conduct web searches to find various industries and associations and educational websites. And they would look at postings such as Monster and Job Builder to see what's happening out there. What are the trends? What are they seeing? What is emerging out of all this information? And they would also follow the leads from the Employment and Training Administration because the Employment and Training Administration actually does have industry partners, and they do talk to people in the industries, and they have other resources as well. So employers, in fact, are talking to the Employment and Training Administration, letting them know what's going on in the occupational arena. And, of course, they would use websites to search for information. So let's take a look at kind of an example of more specifically what we're talking about here. Here we have an occupation, potential new and emerging occupation called allergists and immunologists. And they would describe that occupation. They diagnose and treat diseases or conditions with allergic and immunologic causes. Stock differentiation. It is part of the SOC, but it is not well reflected. So there's a place for it within the SOC and ONET taxonomy, but not specifically at the level of allergists and immunologists. So it's something that could be included. Does it have more than 5,000 people, or projected to have more than 5,000 people by 2012? Well, the American Academy of Allergy, Asthma, and Immunology indicates that it has more than 6,000 members. So, yeah, there's a substantial number of people in this occupation. Does it have a projected positive growth? Again, the American Academy of Allergy, Asthma, and Immunology indicates that there is an increased demand for services because of the increases in rates of asthma and allergies due to such things as pollution and so on. All right. Does the emergence of this potential new and emerging occupation stem from an identifiable trend? And yes, it does. Rates of allergies and asthma in recent years. So many, many more people are getting diagnosed with that particular issue. Is there a licensure or certification requirement? Yep. The board certified by American Board of Allergy and Immunology medical license is required for the certification. So, in fact, there are education and credentials that are offered to help people prepare themselves to be an allergist and immunologist. So there's a 2-year residency, fellowship programs in allergy and immunology offered by a lot of major medical schools. So this is shaping up to be a new and emerging occupation. Are there professional associations? Yes. And there's even a journal that focuses on allergies and immunology. So that would be a candidate new and emerging occupation. So what happens with the next step, after they gather information, at least initial information about the new and emerging occupation, people do a quality control check. And so they go back, and there's another team that goes back and it checks the information that has been already pulled on on that particular potential new and emerging occupation, and perhaps additional information is gathered and obtained. And once people are fairly convinced that this is an excellent candidate for a new and emerging occupation designation, then those candidates are submitted to the Employment and Training Administration for consideration and approval. And what they would be provided is the general information, background, and the trends that are affecting this particular occupation, a listing of the occupational title and a draft definition, and a comparison, such as the chart that I just showed you, of and about that new and emerging occupation as compared to the criteria. The third step is to produce a task list for each approved new and emerging occupation. And so what happens is there are a list of things that people need to do to keep obtaining new information about this new and emerging occupation. And they work with industry experts to come up with the tasks that should be followed through in order to gather more information about the new and emerging occupation. The fourth step is to actually finalize the profile for that occupation. For example, the essential tasks that a person performs within that occupation, and some alternative titles that might be used for that occupation. The fifth step is that the more comprehensive profiles, again, are submitted to Employment and Training Administration for approval, and it would include the ONET stock code, at least proposed ONET stock code, the title of that new and emerging occupation, a description, a task list with the essential tasks actually outlined, as well as the alternate titles. The next step is to actually collect some information about people working in that occupation. So much like information is collected for the regular ONET occupation, they gather information from job incumbents and or occupational specialists. They also gather some supplemental information, such as the tools and technology utilized by people in that occupation, and also a detailed work activities, okay, what people actually do when they work in that particular occupation. And so with this pilot study, they came up with a listing of several new and emerging occupations. And they were found in these particular industries: advanced manufacturing, biotechnology, construction, energy, financial, geospatial, healthcare, retail, and transportation. And my next set of slides, I'm not really going to talk you through all the details, but I want you to see some and a sampling of some of the new and emerging occupations within each of these categories. So I'm going to give you time with each of these next slides to kind of focus on some of the details yourself. So here we go for advanced manufacturing. And so we have mechanical engineering technologists, microsystems engineers, photonics engineers, robotics engineers. And we can see that these are in the advanced manufacturing field. And in the far right-hand column, we have a brief description of that occupation. Biotechnology. We have biochemical engineers, biostatisticians, geneticists, clinical research coordinators, construction, energy engineers, non-destructive testing specialists, security management specialists, energy, so energy brokers, energy auditors, renewable energy technicians, financial, investment fund managers, risk management specialists, geospatial, so geospatial information systems technicians, remote sensing technicians, healthcare, so acupuncturists, clinical nurse specialists, advanced practice psychiatric nurses, and here we have allergists and immunologists, dermatologists, information technology, so web developers and web administrators, network designers, retail, loss prevention managers, online merchants, transportation, so logistics engineers, customs brokers, freight forwarders, okay, well, those are some of the new and emerging occupations that have been identified by the Department of Labor. And basically, those 102 occupations have been identified and named new and emerging occupations. And the Department of Labor is going to continue to research and find new and emerging occupations in high-growth industries. And those 102 occupations are being incorporated into the ONET system and ONET technology. And those are anticipated to be part of the ONET system in June of 2008 in that database update. But 5 of those have already been incorporated within the ONET taxonomy. And those are the ones in information technology. So those are already part of the ONET system. The remaining of the 102 are going to be incorporated into the ONET database in June 2008. And so if you wanted more detail on new and emerging occupations, I would recommend that you go to onetcenter.org and find that PDF file that I have noted for you there. You would go to the new and emerging area and just tick off the methodology report that was used for the pilot study. And within that report, there's a fair amount of additional detail that you can take a look at across all of the industries that were considered, or perhaps you have an interest in only one of the industries and want to see more detail. So that methodology report has more information on each of those industries and the new and emerging occupations that were candidates and which ones were selected. You can also find the listing of occupations in more detail than I've provided to you in this webinar from onetcenter.org as well. And so what I'd like to do at this point is open it up for any questions that you might have, any comments about new and emerging occupations, things that you might know about, information that you might be using already regarding new and emerging occupations. So either send those questions in through the chat box or unmute your phone and go ahead and ask the question or make the comment. Okay, I don't see any questions coming in, but go ahead and send them if you have them. I just do want to let you know that you can go to onetcenter.org and find out a lot more about ONET occupations, and that we do additional webinars that are related to the ONET system, and I hope to see you in future webinars. David says, I think the phones are still muted. Yes, David, you can unmute your phone by hitting *6. And your phone will be unmuted, and you can make the comments or ask the question. And then you would remute your phone. And I do have a question. Most of the new and emerging occupations we see are for people with degrees. We deal with clients with high school diplomas or less. Is the DOL finding new and occupations for them? All I can tell you is that DOL continues to look for new and emerging occupations really everywhere. But recall that I did mention that they're focused on the in-demand industries. And if you've been in some of my other webinars, you would note that the in-demand applications and the ones that are coming online in the near future, about 2/3 of them require some sort of post-secondary education. So I think probably to a substantial degree, they are going to be applications where people are required to have some sort of additional training. Way more than half of these new and emerging occupations were already captured in the DOT. How are these new rather than reinstated? I don't know. I would guess that the DOT did not have all these occupations, and it certainly didn't have an indication of what people do in those occupations. Some of those occupations didn't even exist when the last DOT update was made, and certainly not in the areas of technology. For example, No Child Left Behind wasn't even thought about when the last DOT update was made. If you have a crosswalk between what was shown in the webinar in terms of new and emerging occupations versus the DOT, that might be interesting to see. Let's see. Are there any testing materials that we can give our customers to determine what careers they would meet the criteria for? Well, I'm not sure I understand that question exactly. The criteria that I showed were to identify the occupations, not necessarily the people. There are testing materials that are produced by the U.S. Department of Labor, the ONET Career Exploration Tools, the Interest Profiler, the Work Importance Locator Profiler, and the Ability Profiler. So perhaps that helps. Will BLS be collecting wage information for these new occupations? I believe so. What changes, if any, will be made for the future new and emerging studies based on the pilot method or findings? In my conversations with people at the Department of Labor, they tell me that this pilot study was very successful and that the methodology will continue to be used for new and emerging occupations. Okay, will BLS and state LMI departments be producing 2-year and 10-year occupational projections Frankly, I don't have the answer to that question. I would ask your own agencies or people from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Where is the line drawn between new and emerging occupations versus existing occupations to which new technology has been added? Well, remember the criteria that I spoke about was that the education aspect, the training had to be different. There had to be sufficient numbers of people in this new occupation. The output, the products, the information, whatever the outcome is from that new and emerging occupation has to be different from a related occupation. Okay, and I see your comment, Jeff, and it'd be interesting to see that information. The threshold for considering that a new occupation is N of 5,000. That's what the information that I've read indicates. So, again, there have to be a number of people within that occupation. If there are only a couple hundred people in the occupation, unless it might be especially critical to Homeland Security or the U.S. economy, and I mean especially critical, it probably would not be part of the ONET system. So that's what we're really talking about, is finding occupations that are that have some substance to them in terms of the various work aspects, the numbers of people, and so on. And the description of it has to be somewhat similar to the current occupational description in the ONET system. Will there or has there been a focus on specific state needs? Not that I'm aware of. I think right now the focus has been on keeping the ONET system updated. Okay, any other questions? Okay, very good. Thank you very much for your attention and for all your questions and your comments. And I look forward to seeing you in a webinar in the near future. Thank you very much and have a wonderful